All right, well, thank you. Like Steffi said, I'm Shane Snow. I'm from New York City. I'd like to start out with a scenario. I want to paint a picture. Pretend that you're driving a car. Let's say it's a BMW. One of the two-seaters, the really nice ones, sports car, and it's raining outside. In fact, it's thunder and lightning. The rain is really intense. You're driving in a remote part of the woods, and it's dark out, it's hard to see, and you come across on the side of the road 3 people that are huddling in the rain, and they have no umbrellas. One of those people you recognize as you slow down to see who they are is one of your best friends, that at one point they actually saved your life. But next to them, there's a little old lady with a cane who looks clearly miserable, and like she definitely can't walk to town. And next to her is the man or woman of your dreams. And this is the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to meet them. And like I said, you only have one other seat in the car. So the question is, who do you pick up? So the friend clearly deserves your payback. They saved your life. The little old lady needs your help. She's not going to get back on her own. And clearly the selfish desire, or perhaps nice desire of a future with this person of your dreams, that this is your only shot, is a really worthy one. So the question is, think about it. Who do you pick up? And while you're thinking, I'll tell you the right answer. The right answer is the old woman, of course. And I'll tell you why. You pick up the old woman, you give your keys to your friend, and then you stay with the romantic interest to wait for the bus. And that is the right answer. This is actually my hotel key, but it looks like a fancy BMW key. So I love this puzzle because it's an example of what psychologists call lateral thinking, where the right answer, the best answer, the most elegant solution is the one in which you have to rethink the assumptions upon which the question is based. It's a sideways answer that gets you the most success and the most results. And this is, I guess, the way that computer hackers tend to think. You see this kind of thinking a lot in technology with programmers and with entrepreneurs, that the solutions to the problems that these kinds of people come up with are not the straightforward one, but the ones that require you to break the rules that aren't really rules. In this case, the assumption that because you have one seat, you can only help one person, or that you have to stay in your seat, you have to stay doing what you're doing and keep driving in order to solve the problem. And when you ignore those 2 assumptions, you can solve the problem much more elegantly. So I've been obsessed with this idea of lateral thinking as several years ago I moved to New York City from I grew up in Idaho, in sort of the rural part of the United States. And I moved to New York City so that I could write about technology startups. I was fascinated by these companies that would do these incredible things in implausible amounts of time. These people that you saw sort of defy the expectations of how fast you can move in business. And I started writing about these people, and I was so inspired that I decided to start my own tech company, which is called Contently. Essentially, we help brands become publishers, and journalists make a living doing what they love. And in the course of starting this company, I kept on reporting about tech companies because I wanted to learn their secrets. So I wanted to learn how to do these things so quickly that you see some of these fast-growing startups do. And so I started making lists of what I call superlatives, or sort of the best and the fastest in history of business. So I started looking into, who are the fastest growing companies ever, or the youngest successful entrepreneurs, or the fastest self-made billionaires. What companies have consistently growing stock over and over again and seem to defy the normal course of what people say is natural progress. And some sort of vanity ones, like the youngest Fortune 500 CEOs. So I started digging into their stories and trying to meet some of these people or learn about what they did differently. And a couple years ago, I started getting carried away, and I made an enormous list where I went outside of business, where I wanted to see, I kind of went down this rabbit hole of Wikipedia of who are the fastest risers in entertainment or in the arts. I love surfing, so who are the youngest champion surfers? The fastest rising presidents of countries, and the revolutions that happen the most quickly. And I started learning about these stories and realized that these people and these groups, what they do to beat the norm has a lot in common with what computer hackers do and what smart technology companies do, which is rethink the rules upon which their industries are based. The way to beat the so-called 10,000-hour rule of practice, if you want to get good at a discipline, is to change the rules or to play by a different set of rules, to play a different game. And so I started documenting these patterns among sort of how do you do this? Yes, you can say think outside the box, but what does that mean? And how do these successful and fast successful people and groups do this? And I started calling them Smartcuts. The idea is that if you take a shortcut, you can cut corners, you can get somewhere quicker, allegedly, but if you take a smarter route, you can get somewhere even quicker than that, and do so in a sustainable way. So I ended up writing this book somehow in my spare time called Smartcuts, where I document some of these patterns. And I thought I'd share just one. There's not enough time to share all of the book, but I wanted to share just one of the patterns that I found that I think is particularly relevant to this audience, which I call hacking the ladder. And it starts with an analogy from a game that we used to play back home in Idaho. So in the western part of the United States, in the Rocky Mountains, they're in Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Colorado. It's easy to be bored. There's not a lot to do, and so there's a lot of bored college students. And some of them play this game called Bigger or Better. And what it is it's a sort of scavenger hunt where you get a group of friends and you split up into teams, and you start with an object like a toothpick, something real small. And the object of the game is to go out and to come back at the end of the night having traded that toothpick for something much bigger or better. And whoever comes back with the most awesome thing wins. And so the strategy is you divide into your groups and you take this toothpick and you start knocking on strangers' doors. You knock on the first stranger's door and you say something like, "Hello, we're playing a game called Bigger or Better. Was wondering if you could trade us something slightly bigger or better than this toothpick." Sometimes people will be annoyed or confused, but usually it's kind of fun. They see that these are kids playing a game, and so someone will eventually trade you for a stick of gum or something they don't really need. It's slightly better than a toothpick. So then immediately you take that stick of gum, you go to the next house, you knock on the stranger's door, you say, "We're playing a game called Bigger or Better. Do you have anything slightly bigger or better than this stick of gum that you'd be willing to trade us for?" So eventually someone trades you for a ballpoint pen. They don't really need it, but it's a little better than a piece of gum. So you go to the next house and you trade that ballpoint pen for a half-used pack of Post-it notes. Then you go to the next house, and this person has an admirer that they aren't really interested in. They left them some flowers, so they trade you the flowers that they don't really want to be reminded of for the Post-it notes. Suddenly you have something that someone might actually want. So you go to the next house, and the next person trades you last month's issue of Nylon magazine for the flowers. They put the flowers in a vase. Then you go to the next house and you trade it for a magazine with someone a little prettier on the cover, my hero Ryan Gosling. And then you go to the next house and you trade that magazine for an old novelty Transformers t-shirt. And then when you get to the next house, the kid who answers the door loves Transformers, and suddenly this Transformers t-shirt is valuable to them. You're not just trading sort of for fun anymore, sort of objects that people don't want. This next kid actually wants this. So this is a point you get to at some point in this game. So he trades you his lava lamp. Then you go to the next house, and it's a group of roommates, and they want the lava lamp, so they part with an old mirror. Down the road, there's an older couple who collect antiques, and their grandson just went to college and left his BMX bike, so they trade you the BMX bike for the antique mirror. And then suddenly you're making really interesting trades, and people at the end of the game come home with canoes or television sets. There's even a mythology that someone once came home with a used car. They had to fix it up, but they traded a toothpick for a car. And so the idea behind this game is that in a very short amount of time, you convert this thing of negligible value to something of great value. And it's this principle that gamblers call a parlay, which is you win one bet and you use the money that you just won to place another bet of increasing size. The nice thing about Bigger or Better is you're not betting anything. If someone says no, you just go to the next house. And crucially, you don't keep trying to sell the person who tells you no. You just move on when the door is closed to you. So this idea behind this game, Bigger or Better, points to this principle of hacking the ladder, as I call it, the first principle of which is the idea of small wins. You can't ask someone to trade you a television set for a toothpick, but you can ask them to trade you a television set for a BMX bike, and they can trade you a piece of gum for a toothpick. So by taking the big goal and dividing it into very, very tiny steps, you can trade and accomplish those steps so fast that it shortens the time to the big goal. But there's another part of this that I think is crucial. So if you think about the typical advice that people give around success, say in a career or in building a business, the typical advice is work hard, keep your heads down, pay your dues, climb the ladder in succession. Get the internship, get the entry-level job, and keep climbing until you get to the top. Or launch the product and then iterate until you get to the, to the big leagues. And that takes a long time typically. The thing that the bigger or better kids do that's more important than just trading up is they didn't trade for pieces of wood of increasing size. They traded for different objects. And what they did follows a principle in the animal kingdom that we learned from the cheetah, which is the cheetah is one of nature's great predators, the fastest land animal. It can go 75 miles per hour. I don't know what that translates in kilometers, but it's incredibly fast. And the thing, though, is the cheetah is such a great predator not because it can run fast, but because it can jump sideways. Because when the antelope try to dodge out of the way, the cheetah can jump and catch them. This is the thing that makes it a distinguished predator versus other animals that can run fast. And one side note, that if you want to waste an hour of your day, say when you're preparing a presentation, Google baby cheetah, and you might get sucked down a rabbit hole for an hour or so. So if you get anything out of this talk, there's that. But this principle of jumping sideways is the real principle behind the game bigger or better. You're not trading toothpicks for bigger sticks until you have a big tree. You're trading toothpicks for pieces of gum and flowers for television sets. And this is the principle upon which some of the fastest moving, successful people in business and the fastest product launches are built on. So for example, I researched the average journey to become a Fortune 500 CEO in America. On average, it takes 30 years. And usually it's this traditional idea of you join as an entry-level employee and you work your way up the ladder. You work hard, you prove that you have what it takes, and then you wait until the CEO steps down. Or people above you sort of remove themselves from the ladder so that you can keep climbing. But when you look at the youngest Fortune 500 CEO, this woman, who I think spoke at DLD a couple of years ago, Marissa Mayer from Yahoo, she didn't do the traditional path. She actually would have had to be 7 years old in order to take that 30-year journey before she got CEO. What she did is she joined a fast-growing startup, Google. She worked hard. She earned credibility there. And then she got to a point where she hit the ceiling, where she couldn't grow anymore because the CEO was the founder who'd returned. They were bringing executives, SVPs in. 1 million people were vying for that next slot on the ladder. What happened to her is what happened in Bigger or Better, is you see this principle that people are willing to take a chance on someone or something that's one rung lower on the ladder, but not 10. You won't trade a toothpick for a television set, but you will trade a bike for a television set. What she did is she reached over to a sideways ladder and joined Yahoo. Yahoo took the chance on this up-and-coming, fast-rising person who'd proved that she had what it took, but who hadn't put in the 30 years of experience, and they brought her in, and so far she's been incredibly successful. You see this pattern in some of the the breakouts in many other industries. James Patterson, currently the world's best-selling author, has sold over 250 million books. He climbed the ladder in the advertising industry and then moved over from advertising to becoming a novelist. He used his credibility and his expertise in marketing to sell his first book and to build an empire in fiction. And he essentially jumped over all of the people who had been spending years and years in the literature world working their way up. You see Academy Award-winning actresses like Zoe Saldana, who she built her career in ballet and then got her first breakout film role as a ballet dancer. Rather than becoming an extra and slowly earning more acting credits, she jumped over after she'd climbed one ladder and then went on to many other blockbuster films. And you see this pattern actually with a lot of famous actors and entertainers, as they get their start in a different industry and then move over. I also studied in the first chapter of my book, I talk about how when you look at the data, the fastest or the best presidents of the United States, as ranked by historians, are the ones who have the least time in politics. They're the ones who, instead of becoming a junior senator, a state senator, then a congressman, then a senator, then majority leader, then vice president, then president, they're the ones who were military leaders and then moved over to politics, or philanthropists, or university presidents. These people actually end up doing a better job, and it's because they're more flexible. Because the presidents who spent the most time in politics, by the time they get there, they feel like they've earned the right to be there, that they know so much that they're unwilling to deviate from the track that's the expected track. So when inevitably the skill of a president is to be flexible and to listen to ideas, the worst ranked presidents in history are the ones who didn't do that. And there's a correlation to their sideways ladder climbs and the ability to be flexible. And you also look at products. The iPhone was one of the fastest selling products, the most breakthrough products that changed history and changed several industries. And it came from a computer company at a time when only telecommunication companies made phones. It wasn't a huge stretch for people to reach down one rung lower on the ladder and to pick up a phone made by a computer company, but it was something that no one had really done before. And in this way, Apple parlayed its credibility in the computing business to move over to take over the phone business and to create a new industry. So you also see research on how this affects internally companies. The average raise in the United States annually for an employee that stays at a job is 1% to 3%, whereas the average lift you get in pay when you switch jobs is 10% to 20%. So what you see are these young people who switch jobs every 2 to 3 years and suddenly are making much more money than their colleagues who stay in one course, which is actually a big problem for companies that want to retain talent. You also see research that says that startup companies that pivot, that don't completely change what they're doing, but they take one step sideways 1 to 2 times, are many times more likely to succeed than startups that stay in one path and refuse to adapt. The other side of this is startups that pivot too many times are less focused and more likely to fail. But this idea of moving sideways when something is preventing progress actually speeds up business success. So I used this same idea inadvertently in my journey to become a journalist. When I got started, I loved Wired magazine, and I really wanted to write for them. And so the first thing I did when I decided to become a tech journalist is I pitched the features editor of the print magazine at Wired this great story idea I had. And he wrote me back and he said, "Hey kid, I admire the enthusiasm, but come back in a few years when you've earned some experience." And so what I did is I thought about what would the minimum requirement for Wired be to print an author? And it's probably to have written for a slightly lower publication or a slightly smaller story for a publication that's sideways. So what I did is I started with a publication that was willing to print just anyone, which at the time was a one-person blog called The Next Web. So I freelanced a few pieces for The Next Web. Then I went one slightly bigger or better layer up to Gizmodo, and I freelanced a few pieces for them, saying, "Hey, I've written for The Next Web. You should give me a shot." I went from Gizmodo to Mashable, saying the same thing. I went from Mashable to Fast Company, saying, "Hey, I've written for Mashable and Gizmodo and others." And then 6 months after that first email that I got back from the Wired editor, I pitched him again, and I said, "Hey, I've written all of these pieces for Fast Company and Mashable and Gizmodo and The Next Web." And he gave me a shot and printed. They ended up running my first feature story in Wired 6 months after he had told me that it would take years to essentially climb the ladder. Start as an intern, become a junior fact checker, become a junior reporter, senior writer, wait for a columnist to die of liver failure, and then get your shot as a big shot writer. And then I was able to use that credibility to write for The New Yorker, which was a dream of mine. And then from there, I stepped sideways to convince venture capitalists to give my friends and I millions of dollars to start a company that had to do with journalism and helping shape the future of how journalists work and how brands can become publishers. So it wasn't a huge reach for these investors to take a bet on us because it was just a sideways step, something slightly bigger or better from a different ladder that I'd been climbing. So I'm almost out of time, but I want to share as an end note a story about one of my favorite women. She's here on the left. This is Michelle Phan, who's a pioneer, I guess, in YouTube artistry and makeup design. To the right is another amazing guy named Bear Vasquez. He's the guy who, if you saw the Double Rainbow video a few years ago, he went in his backyard, he saw 2 rainbows, and he marveled, and he cried and put the video on YouTube, and it had millions and millions of views. So his video went viral in July of, I believe, 2011, might have been 2010. And 30 million people watched it. He was on the Jimmy Kimmel show. Everyone was parodying this video. And then the dust kind of settled. And in the same month, Michelle Phan was a university student. She made a YouTube tutorial of how to do the makeup for Lady Gaga's video Bad Romance. This video similarly went viral, had a similar number of views, about 30 million views on YouTube. But what happened to these two people was different And because of this hacker idea, where after the dust settled and Bear Vasquez went on with his life, he was still kind of left wondering what this all means. And he tried to recreate the double rainbow video over and over again. He posted over 1,000 videos to his YouTube channel, trying to capture this same magic and this same humor. The problem was it had been inadvertent. And so he posted all these videos, and he never quite could capture it. And you find him all over the internet commenting on anyone that writes about double rainbow anymore. And he's never been able to sort of move on from there. He's stuck in one path, trying to follow a linear path to doing the same thing, just a little bit bigger. On the other hand, Michelle Phan has turned that YouTube video into a career. She has started her own, she first got a makeup line with Sephora and then parlayed that into her own makeup line with L'Oreal. She started her own production company. She has a fast-growing startup with hundreds of thousands of paid subscribers, and she's on her way to becoming the next Elizabeth Arden or Martha Stewart. She's building an empire, one of the sharpest young business people out there. And the thing she did differently than Bear Vasquez and most sort of one-hit wonders on YouTube is she was prepared for when lightning struck. She had posted dozens of videos of other just as quality makeup tutorials on her YouTube channel that no one had seen. But as soon as she had one go viral, suddenly people discovered her other work, that she was prepared to harness that momentum. She took that momentum and immediately parlayed it for something slightly bigger or better. Not forward, but sideways. She parlayed that into a makeup line, and then that into a spokesmanship, and then eventually into a thriving business empire. And what she said is that you can't predict when lightning will strike, but you have to be prepared to harness the momentum and to keep that momentum going. And the way to do that is not necessarily straightforward, but to move to the side and to not stop when progress normally stops you. And so the thing that I guess if I'm going to plant a seed with you today, I'd like to plant the seed of this idea that lateral thinking, everyone talks about innovation and thinking outside the box and creativity until these words mean nothing. I think when you think about innovation, think about lateral thinking in that what you're doing now may be important, but the bigger opportunity may be one step sideways. And that any of us who are in business, who are thinking creatively about what to do next, can rewrite the rules that we've been given, can question those assumptions of how many people we can help when we have one seat in the car. And I guess I'd posit that even though people say that the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, that sometimes the fastest distance is to take a step sideways and to build your own path. And with that, I'll thank you and goodbye.